I am Mathieu Billecart, and I'm the seventh generation of the Billecart family to lead Champagne Billecart-Salmon. This is my very first Instagram live, so you'll have to forgive me if I am not following the appropriate protocol. But thank you all for joining. It's great to have you there, and thank you for T. Edwards for inviting us to do this video. I know all of you are going through quite a tough time. We are going through the same thing in France, so this show should have been at the winery, but it is done from my garden because we are in lockdown, much like you guys in New York. Whilst it is very tricky and testing, that shouldn't stop us from learning new things and having a little bit of fun along the way. I don't know. For those of you that don't know Billecart-Salmon, we are a medium-sized maison de champagne or champagne house. We were founded in 1818, so that's 202 years ago. And the foundation of the house happened when my great-great-great-great-grandfather, a gentleman called Nicolas Francois Billecart, married a lady called Elizabeth Salmon, who's my great-great-great-great-grandmother. That was in 1818, and my Nicolas Francois also partnered with Elizabeth's brother, a gentleman called Louis Salmon, and they founded a business called Billecart-Salmon using the two family name. Our estate is based in Marais-sur-Aille. No reason for you to have heard of it. It's a tiny village next to Épernay. But whilst it is small in size, it is very strategically located. It's located really on the cusp of Montagne de Reims. I'm physically sitting on Montagne de Reims right now. It's at the start of Vallée de Marne, and if you go up the hill overlooking Marais-sur-Aille, you can look across Côte des Blancs. Why am I telling you all that? I'm telling you all that because if you take broad perspective, Montagne de Reims is a well-known, possibly the best area to grow Pinot Noir. The Vallée de Marne is where we get the very best Pinot Meunier, and Côte des Blancs is the Fifth Avenue of Chardonnay. So we are right at the epicenter of Champagne. And what that means is for Billecart-Salmon, we source our grapes, about over 90% of our grapes come from 20-kilometer radius around our village. And that's basically where all the Grand Cru and Premier Cru sit. Our house vinify in sort of traditional style and work with both stainless steel tanks, which is the most common use method at the moment, and this has been so since the World War II, since the 1960s. But we also brought back in the mid-90s oak barrels. So the cuvée I'm presenting to you today is a cuvée, you can see it there, is a cuvée Brut Sous Bois. You can recognize it because the latest label has an actual wood label. Don't know whether you guys can see that, but that is real wood on the label. You would have seen it previously with a sort of dark brown label, but the new one is real wood. That doesn't really change the structure of the wine, which we're going to come and talk about in a minute. Why Brut Sous Bois? That's a bit of a tricky story, like only the French people can come up with. But la mise sous bois in French is where you fill up a barrel. This is the topping up right at the end to make sure your wine, there is as little air in the barrel as possible. So when you do the mise sous bois is when you fill up the barrel right to the very top. So this cuvée is called Brut Sous Bois because of the mise sous bois. It made sense to us when we created it. This is one of our latest edition in the range. We have a range of 11 cuvées, which is a lot. We like to provide for different taste in our clients and community. And we know that taste, everybody's very different there. But that was first put on the market about 10 years ago in 2011, and that was done on a 2006 harvest. So let's talk technical, because I know a number of you are sort of specialists and know already quite a lot. So blend. Blend-wise, this is the only cuvée at Billecart-Salmon which is a third of each of the main grapes in Champagne. There are 7 allowed, but we use the main 3. So it's a third of Chardonnay, and this is Chardonnay from Côte des Blancs mainly, a third of Pinot Noir mainly from Montagne de Reims, and a third of Meunier. So a third, a third, a third. That's very easy to remember. A number of you might know that we have quite an extensive catalogue of reserve wine. So that wine typically has between a third and 40% of reserve wine. So in addition to a base year, which in this case, this is a base year 2010, the wine has reserve wines of 09, 08, and we also have Solera system. Solera, some of you will know, is we basically blend multiple years. So every year we empty about a tenth of the barrel and we add a tenth of the existing harvest. And we've been doing it since the mid 2000s, so it's now about 15 years in those barrels, and that enables us to give sort of a smoother change in taste, and that enables us for better control and better quality. So that's the blend. In terms of technique, our house is well known for its method of fermentation, which it's done at sort of a cold temperature. What do we mean by that? Our alcoholic fermentation, which is a process to transform pressed grapes into alcohol, happens at about 13 degrees Celsius. Don't ask me what that is in Fahrenheit, I have absolutely no idea. But the 13 degrees Celsius is the physical limit sugar transform into alcohol. What that means is the process is much slower than it would happen normally when it's much higher in temperature. The yeast have to work that little bit harder to be able to get the process. Why do we do it? Other than the fact that we have the luxury of time, we do it because that gives a level of finesse and elegance in our wine that we can't do when you do things too quickly. So that's for the fermentation. For the very technical ones, we tend to block the malolactic fermentation on these. We're going to come back to aging, but these are quite old, typically quite old or long aging on these. So we find that keeping the acidic tension is a guarantee for greater longevity and greater power, which is one of the characteristics of that cuvée. So vinification in oak barrels, the Burgundian ones, 228 liters, 228 liters. We do the soutirage, so the emptying of the barrel on around March, April. So it's 6 months typically. We don't want this doesn't stay in the barrel like you would get the red wines, for example. This is in the barrel for about 6 months. Then this goes to the bottling. So this would have been 2010 harvest, bottled in the beginning of 2011, and this is now being put on the market in back end of 2019, 2020. So this is what you guys have in New York, at the moment. It's quite uncommon to have non-vintage champagnes that are that old. Non-vintage champagnes have the right to be released after 15 months in the bottle. At Billecart, we always have long aging because the quality of the grapes and the quality of the cru we use, but this is very long. This is very long for a non-vintage, and I'll come back to why we do that in a minute. Final bit in the process before we start tasting, because I'm now incredibly thirsty, is the dosage. So the dosage here is around 7 grams. This is a Brut. Brut, the band for dosage is between 7 and 13 grams. So this is at the very low end of what you do in Brut. And after disgorgement, we start shipping our wine 6 months after, so that the time things have started to blend in. So really, by the time this bottle has got to you, it's been with us for a good 10 years. Right, should we start tasting? I hope you have one in your house, or if not, then you'll try next time. This is the embarrassing bit where I can't do it properly, no. So, here we come. I should have had an assistant, but she's not there. Right, for today I picked quite a broad champagne glass. I suspect this conversation might last a little bit, so I poured myself quite a big glass. Can you see? Well, actually, no, you can't. A few things. I tend to drink my champagne in sort of broader, bigger flutes, which really are sort of white wine glasses more than anything. Frankly, you can enjoy champagne in whatever glass you really want, and this is a matter of personal taste. But for cuvées like these, there are big wines and a lot of fantastic cru selection in there. So for them to express themselves, they do need a slightly broader base, and have a big nose as well. So I can't have such a tiny glass. Color-wise, well, actually, before we get to that, the style of Billecart generally across all the cuvées and the adjectives we seek in the tasting committee is finesse, elegance, and balance. That's the DNA of all the cuvées at Billecart: finesse, elegance, and balance. However, a little bit like children, when they're raised in the same way, they all grew up slightly differently and have their own personalities. And the personality of that wine, if you don't compare it with the top sort of vintage cuvées, this is a more complex, richer, and more structured cuvées than, for example, you'd have in the Brut Reserve. Okay, so already in the color, I don't know whether that shows as well as it would, but the color here is already a lot deeper than you would have in a sort of younger champagne. There are two main characteristics of that. Sort of younger champagnes would have sort of more pale yellow with sort of possibly light, very, very light green. This is sort of yellow straw. That's largely a function of age, and it's a function of the fact that 2/3 of that cuvée also is sort of vinified in red grapes. The first thing that's striking, I think, with that cuvée is, and a comment we get very frequently from people is this doesn't smell oaky. And that's possibly the best compliment we can have, because we don't seek that cuvée to be oaky. Actually, we work quite hard for it not to be. How do we achieve that? We achieve that by doing three things. First, we are extremely selective on what parcel we use. So it's not only the villages that we know, it's actually the parcel and the age of the vines that we know are going to be capable of benefiting from wood vinification instead of stainless steel. So that's first thing, is selection of the parcel. The second thing is the barrels are quite old. In fact, we have over 400 barrels, which is a lot for Champagne. We are in sort of top 3 or top 5 barrel owners in Champagne. And these barrels are over 15 years old, 1-5. So by that stage, the barrels are not marking the wine as much as you would have in new wood. And that's done on purpose. We do it because we want the oak barrel vinification gives us that micro-oxidation that you would not be able to get in stainless steel. However, we don't want the wine to be oaky. So old wood and strong cru selection make sure you get the first bit of the balance. But there is one sort of a third component of that, and that's time. Great cru, Grand Cru take time to settle. It's a little bit like great red wines. They may be full of potential, but they're not going to be at their most expressive in their 2, 3, 4 years. So we always give the Sous Bois a good 5 years and more, and sometimes we switch the releases to be able to make sure by the time they get to you, they are in a state where we consider to be the start of their drinking window and they've reached their potential. So time is a very big factor, and you can have that on the nose. So the first characteristic you will have, and I'm sure you have the same, and you are shouting at me various adjectives that you have in your tasting. This smells toasty. This smells sort of gingerbread, nutty, toffee. This is you sense already that you are moving away from your basic champagne. You already have a little bit more structure, richness, power. You already have that in the glass, or certainly I have it. And when you use these glasses, they make sure you get the potential. On the taste, well, let's see. So the taste, to keep it simple, the first thing you gauge, and we tend to underestimate when we do it at Billecart, is the distinctive feature. Billecart is very smooth bubbles, very small bubbles, very smooth. So the first thing is the touch of the palate is very Billecart. It's very soft. We don't want, whilst it's more powerful for Billecart, we don't want sort of a wine to be aggressive. It has to be on the right side of powerful and rich. But the smoothness of the bubbles is the same as you would get in other cuvées. You do get that tiny slight oxidation, and that comes from the barrels, and that's a signature. We want that cuvée to be that. Some of you will love it, some of you may feel that they prefer the stainless steel, but that's the reason why we have 11 cuvées. But on that one, unashamedly, we want it to be different, and we want that micro oxidation, and we get it. The aromas in the taste are obviously coherent with what you get in the nose. I would say certainly you get the richness and the power. You know, I still have the back palate of that sip I took a minute ago, and that comes from the selection of these parcels. But you get the yellow fruit, the toastiness, the melted butter. Our chef de cave Florent would give you about 3 pages of the different adjectives. I can only manage about 10, 20. But you can see already you are tasting that little bit, that champagne slightly bigger. So it's, in terms of when to enjoy it, I think it starts at aperitif for grown-ups. So this, if you're expecting the lighter end of things, then you will get your kick with our Brut Reserve, our Brut Rosé, possibly our Blanc de Blanc. This is bigger. This is bigger, designed to be bigger. It's a food wine. At Billecart, we want and we know that all our wines have to be capable to deal with food. Now, obviously, they can't cope with all kind of food, but that one is certainly at the range that is very capable of dealing with cooked food. My favorite pairing with this is Comté cheese. 18 months old Comté cheese. You cut it in sort of sticks, you know, the sort of 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter sticks, and we serve it at the estate when we have some guests coming over the cheese board, because we find certainly the dry sort of not the melted cheese one, but the drier one, the Comté, the Beaufort, the Tête de Moine, and things like that. They deal very well. So that's the sort of one of the easy pairing to make. It also loves mushrooms, all things mushroomy. You will see that certainly a very big sort of feel what you get in the mouth. And also, whilst this is not exactly the season, stuffed poultry. Stuffed poultry works really well. Poultry generally, even with a sauce. And on low sugar desserts, it works too. So things with nuts. Pierre Hermé, with one of the possibly best pâtissiers that we have in Paris, or certainly right out there, did a dessert for us based on this. So it's incredibly versatile for food, and therefore I think at least you should give it a try. Consider it to be different, more powerful than your average Billecart. Right. Does that give you a decent overview? You might be shouting on your phone, but I can't hear anything from here. I saw the question as to the percentage of the base harvest. So in this particular bottling, the reserve wine component was 40%. So you have 60% 2010, but roughly speaking, assume between a third and 40%, which is quite a lot. It's a lot, but it's less than you would get, for example, in our Brut Reserve, where currently we are between 55 and 60. Okay. Any more questions? I was going to say you will want to go to a bar, but I don't think that's going to happen today, so you better open that bottle here. Look, so if that does the trick, well, first, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story. In this difficult time, take care of you, take care of your loved ones, continue to do all you can to help in whatever way you can to fight that bloody virus. The sooner it's over, I think the happier we'll be. We'll have a great party. Please help the health professionals and all these fighters out there that are keeping us safe. Enjoy your tasting. All the best, and hopefully see you soon.